I learned from his pops, one of the biggest gangsters in Harlem. And I said, yo, all right, okay, you know, what's up? You're gonna listen to those guys. You understand? So New York Freddie said, Puff father sold to one of their undercover guys. You understand? They arrested him because they had cops on the payroll to, you know, see what you about. He said they brought him the tape and the written confession that Puff father signed. So now he's become addicted. He's in alcohol now.
Y'all, Frank Lucas's son, Frank Jr., just came out to expose Diddy for working as a substance pusher for Frank. And when I tell you that these courts exploded over this insanity, get this. Not only is Jr. calling Diddy out for moving substances, but he's claiming that Diddy allegedly people on Frank's orders. Now, Diddy's trial has been going on from bad to worse, and Junior's revelations are about to take things to a new level. See, in addition to all the SA charges, Diddy is also facing charges, and the last thing he needs is to have the son of the most notorious kingpin in American history name him as a part of the organization. But that's not all the wild stuff, because Junior also testified that Diddy allegedly built his own enterprise from knowledge that he picked up while working for Frank. This is about to be crazy, so let's get into it. Okay, so this has been the craziest plot twist that we've seen in this Diddy trial so far. I mean, sure, we knew that there was going to hear a whole lot from Cassie and his free courts and many other victims that he allegedly essayed, but one name that was not on anybody's radar is Frank Lucas Jr., son of the notorious kingpin Frank Lucas, you know? Frank Lucas, one of the most notorious crime bosses in Harlem. The movie American Gangster was made about him, so y'all know that he was a real bad man. So what exactly was Diddy doing getting caught up in all this? Well, according to Frank Lucas Jr., it's because allegedly Diddy used to work with Frank. Not just work, but Jr. was claiming that Diddy allegedly worked as a and for his father. He's claiming that Diddy allegedly helped his father people. We're talking about Frank's ops, competitors, anyone who needed to be taught a lesson, people who didn't fall in line and stuff like that. See, if you needed to have someone to have that kind of mafia style talk with somebody, allegedly Diddy was your guy. Because that's not all. Junior has also claimed that Diddy allegedly helped his father move substances. While it might be hard to imagine Diddy working as a fixer, it's not crazy to imagine him moving substances. I mean, multiple sources have accused him of using substances. Cassie, Little Rod, Don Richard, they all accused him in a lawsuit of allegedly taking substances. So right around the time he was raided by Homeland Security, a man named Brendan Paul was also arrested by the feds. And who is Brendan? Well, word in the streets is that he allegedly is Diddy's and helped him move substances. So between Diddy's alleged use and distribution of substances, it is really shocking to believe that he allegedly got his start by pushing weight for a lord. But if anything, it kind of explains a lot. But hold on, how on earth did Diddy get caught up with somebody like Frank Lucas? Well, it isn't quite exactly hard for him, considering that Diddy's father was also caught up with Frank Lucas. Some fathers pass on pocket watches to their sons, but it looks like Diddy's father, Melvin Combs, allegedly passed on his contacts to his son. In a new interview, Diddy's former bodyguard, Gene Dill, claimed that Diddy allegedly inherited the business from his father.
So New York Freddie said, Puff father sold to one of their cover guys. You understand? They arrested him because they had cops on the payroll to, you know, see what you about. He said they brought him the tape and the written confession that Puff father signed. So I was like, yo, he said, we gave him $10,000. It was a New York City cop. He worked for them. He said, we gave him $10,000. Puff father said that he only told because he had a wedding to go to, which I thought was hilarious. You understand? This is coming from New York Freddie. So he said that I wanted to talk to Puff, but he wouldn't take my calls, he wouldn't see me. He said, I wanted to let him know that I told the guy, y'all gotta get rid of him. Y'all brought him in, y'all got to get rid of him.
But let's unpack this stuff here. Gene's story really opens up a whole new perspective on Diddy, suggesting he might have taken over his father's street dealings and operations, and when his dad passed, most people thought it all ended with him. But Gene claims it never really stopped, it just went quiet, with Diddy supposedly managing behind the scenes, using Bad Boy Records as a cover. But let's get into the deeper stuff and talk about Diddy's dad. Melvin Combs died when Diddy was just 3 years old. Diddy has said he doesn't remember much about him, but it makes sense given how young he was when it happened. It's not exactly shocking that his early years might have influenced the man he became. A lot of psychologists agree that childhood experiences, especially the ones, can seriously shape a person's development, and studies show that when a kid goes through a whole lot of chaos early on, it often shows up in how they move through life as an adult. Let's be real a second for a millisecond. Looking at this chaos that seems to follow Diddy, it's not a stretch to think that something heavy might have happened in his early years. From the way the story unfolds, it seems like Diddy was likely exposed pretty early in life, which raised some serious questions about how safe or stable his childhood really was. His father, Melvin Earl Combs, wasn't just a regular guy. He was close friends with none other than Frank Lucas. Yes, the same Frank Lucas who admitted to substances in the coffins of U.S. soldiers. But here's where it gets confusing, because Melvin had served in the U.S. Air Force, so you'd think he'd be the last person hanging out with somebody like Lucas. But apparently their relationship wasn't just casual. Melvin was actually involved in the game too. He worked with Lucas and was dealing with himself, so while he wore the uniform by day, he was allegedly knee-deep in the street business on the side. And that's a serious double life. And honestly, it kind of puts things into perspective. If Diddy really grew up around that kind of duplicity, one image for the public and another behind closed doors, it makes you wonder how much of that mindset rubbed off on him. Looks like the whole apple not falling far from the tree saying might apply here. But it wasn't just Melvin. His brothers, Diddy's uncles, were also involved in the game. Not like I mentioned earlier, Melvin was killed when Diddy was about 2 or 3 years old, and word on the streets is it happened during a deal that went wrong. Diddy was always been open about the death of his father and how hard it was on him, like the time he said, "Being that my father was killed when I was 3 years old, I don't have a lot of memories of my father. They say you can't miss something you never had, but that's only a little ways right. There's definitely been times I've gotten older that I've missed my father, his presence, not being here. There's things that you would ask your father. There's also things that you would celebrate with him that would make him proud." In another interview, he bragged about how his father was a dealer, saying, "My father was a hustler. He was a substance dealer and he was a hustler. So I learned early in life that there's only 2 ways out of that. End jail." It made me work even harder. Sometimes you can't just answer why things happen, but I definitely think the route that I went on, staying out of the streets and hitting my books and trying to be somebody, I think he played a role in that. I have his hustler's mentality, his hustler spirit, his drive, his determination, his swag. But that was a straight up lie. If there's one thing we do know about Diddy, it's that he definitely didn't stay away from the streets, and he was not buried in books. Sure, he got into Howard University, but let's not forget he dropped out pretty quickly. School just wasn't his thing, and he was way more focused on hustling and chasing the industry life than hitting the books. So for him to try and paint himself as some kind of academic overachiever, please. Is it just me, or was it a little strange how he openly praised his father and talked about how alike they were, like Melvin wasn't a known criminal? That alone should have raised some eyebrows, but most folks probably just chalked it up to Diddy being sentimental about a dad he barely got to know. But still, looking back, that kind of admiration for someone who lived that kind of life feels like it should have been an early sign that Diddy's own path might not be all that different. But like I mentioned earlier, Diddy's father worked closely with Frank Lucas. These days, some folks try to downplay his role by saying he was just a driver or some kind of chauffeur, but the truth runs a lot deeper. According to Frank Lucas himself, Melvin wasn't just along for the ride, he played a key role in the operation. It was a significant part of the syndicate. And in an interview, he said, "Melvin Combs, he's a good friend of mine. That's Puff Daddy's father. He used to bring his son to my house every day, at least 2 or 3 times a week. And my daughter used to push him off the toys. He made it great. You see, where he's at now, he's on top of the world." The interviewer also asked, "Were you and Melvin just friends or business partners?" And Lucas replied, "All of the above. We did business and we were good friends. He was a really good friend of mine." The interviewer also asked, "Do you remember how you met him?" And Lucas said, "We all were out there on 7th Avenue and everybody knew everybody out there. I don't remember how I met him, but We had a good relationship. Unfortunately, things took dark turns when the feds began plotting to dismantle Frank Lucas's empire, and they needed someone close to the operation to use as leverage, and that person ended up being Melvin. Well, let's be clear, Melvin wasn't a according to what has been reported. He was actually set up by the feds, who used him as a way to get to Lucas without his knowledge or consent. Investigators allegedly tapped Melvin's phones and began tracking his movements. At some point, word got back to the syndicate and they assumed Melvin had flipped and was cooperating with the law enforcement, believing he was a threat, and they took him out. He was later found on Central Park West in the head, and witnesses said the scene was brutal. His head was completely out. It was clearly a calculated action, but for whatever reason it was written off as just another deal gone bad, and his death ended up being connected to a major ring bust. Yet no one was ever arrested or charged for the murder. Naturally, all attention turned to Frank Lucas. Rumors started swirling that he was the one who hoarded on Melvin, thinking Melvin had flipped and was cooperating with the feds, but Lucas always denied any involvement. He insisted he had nothing to do with Melvin's death and claimed they were close, saying Melvin would come to his house several times a week. And just because Melvin was gone didn't mean he was off the hook. The feds actually brought charges against him even after he died, revealing his involvement in New York's substance scenes. In 1973, Melvin was officially named as a co-conspirator in the huge case, even though he had already died by the time the others were convicted, and prosecutors believed his death might be connected to other people involved in the operation, though exactly who and why remains unclear. Bottom line, if Melvin hadn't died, he probably would have faced some serious charges too. But after losing his father, Diddy's mom, Janice, did everything she could to shield her 3-year-old son from the harsh truths about his dad's life and to keep him from following the same path. When Diddy was 12 years old, she relocated him and his sister from Harlem to Mount Vernon, New York. She juggled several jobs to make sure that Diddy could attend a private school, doing her very best to give him a chance at a different future. But speaking about this, he said, "Until I was 12, I lived in Harlem. Then we moved to Mount Vernon, New York, and that was my mom's way of getting us out of the inner city after my father was. But my grandmother lived in Harlem, so I went back and forth. And I remember the simple things about Mount Vernon, grass, trees, and being able to play baseball. In Harlem, there was no little league, no front yard with grass, but the neighborhood was multicultural, so that broadened my horizons." Well, reports say that Janice was willing to do whatever it took to give Diddy the best life possible, even if it meant going into debt. And the streets were rough, and she was determined to keep him away from that world. So in 1987, she enrolled him in Mount St. Michael Academy, an all-boys Catholic school. Honestly, knowing what we know about Diddy, it's pretty wild to think that he went to a Catholic school, but even crazier that he served as an altar boy. Well, Janice was so focused on protecting Diddy that she never told him the real story behind Melvin Combs' death. According to Diddy, she kept it from him because she didn't want him to follow in his father's footsteps. In a 2006 interview with Oprah Winfrey, Diddy, who was known as P. Diddy back then, revealed that his mom told him Melvin died in a car accident. But as he got older, he started digging around and realized that his mom hadn't told him the whole story. Eventually, he uncovered the truth by himself. He said, "She tried to protect me. My father was a hustler who sold drugs. During this time, that was the way out of Harlem, either that or playing basketball." He said, "My mother didn't want me to follow in his footsteps, so she was selective about which truths she told me. My father was in the army, and he owned a limousine service, and he died in a car accident. Actually, he was in the car, but even as a kid, I put 2 and 2 together. I noticed that guys from the streets in Harlem always seemed to know my family's last name. I used to run with your father, they tell me. All my uncles were street hustlers as well." Well, during this May 2014 commencement speech at Howard University, Combs opened up again about how he found out about the truth of his dad's death. He explained that while he was briefly at the university, he dug through some library archives and came across a newspaper article revealing that his father had been a drug gone wrong. You would think that with such a painful family history and knowing how hard his mom worked, juggling 2 jobs and almost going into debt to send him to private Catholic school, the least he could do was make her proud by staying clean and staying clear of a hard life, right? Sadly, things didn't go as they'd hoped. Even while at his private Catholic school, Diddy was already getting pulled into the drug world. Rumors say that he became tight with Andrew Campos, who was a part of the notorious Gambino family. The two played football together at St. Michael's and stayed close even after graduation. And Campos climbed the ranks and eventually became a captain in the Gambino family, but in 2022, he was arrested on charges, and fraud. he ended up getting sentenced to 37 months in prison. But Diddy's connection to Campos wasn't the end of it. According to Gene, not only did Diddy take over his dad's old operation, but he also allegedly started expanding it. While the business was mainly centered in Harlem, Gene claims Diddy tried to spread his reach into other cities, including Detroit, Michigan. If you remember a Jane Doe who sued Diddy in 2023, this was actually brought up. She's the anonymous woman who accused Diddy and some of his associates, including Harvey Pierre, of and her when she was just 17. In her lawsuit, she also revealed that Diddy's supposed ties to the BMF organization, yes, that BMF, in Detroit of all places. The connections just keep piling up, don't they? According to her, the BMF helped Diddy launch Bad Boy Records, and the label was allegedly being used as a front for money ever since. And according to that lawsuit, a decade earlier, Mr. Combs funded Bad Boy and installed his longtime friend Mr. Pierre into the role of president. At the time, Mr. Combs had many connections to Michigan, including among others to the Black Mafia family, BMF, a organization that is rumored to have been seeded Bad Boy. Accordingly, upon information and belief, Mr. Combs' associates, including Mr. Pierre and a third assailant, spent significant time in and around Detroit, Michigan. But don't even get me started on how Diddy seems to love tricking or forcing other celebs into using. Now, we all know about Cassie, Lil Rod, and the other lawsuit, but there are rumors of other occasions that people seem to have forgotten about. And get this, the celebs are always people working under him who can't really say no to him. For example, when he signed rapper Machine Gun Kelly to Bad Boy Records in 2011, Kelly said Diddy gave him something to smoke that was unlike anything he had ever smoked before. Kelly said, "I'd smoked something that Puff had given me. It was as if I had partied like 3 nights straight. I was like, I'm about to go to the airport. I need something that'll knock me out." It totally did the opposite. I was doing crazy dance moves to the weirdest music for 20 minutes straight, like while he was on the phone, and I was just outside the window looking in while he was looking at me like, man, this kid's. Between him allegedly being involved with the BMF gang and pushing substances, it's not hard to believe Frank Lucas Jr.'s comments about Diddy allegedly being Frank Lucas's and substance pusher. Y'all, the situation is a hot mess, but I got to know what y'all think about this. Drop your thoughts and comments below and then check out this next video.